Today we're going to talk about tenant brokerage. If you are a tenant looking to lease commercial property in the North Carolina or South Carolina markets, then you've come to the right place to learn a little bit more about tenant brokerage and what it means and how it works. My name is Rob Cassam. I'm the owner and broker in charge of Carolina Realty Advisors. My contact information can be found at charlottencproperty.com. I've been representing tenants for the past 10 years in leasing commercial space. And with that being said, let's jump into the first part of a three-part series here. And the first part is called Tenant Brokerage. Why would anybody want or need a tenant? And really, it really starts with a big question here, which is how can you make sure that you don't pay too much for a property, lease a lousy property in a bad area, or expose yourself or your business to stress, potential litigation, or possibly waste your time in the process? And the answer to that is with good tenant representation, which is what we're going to talk about. Good tenant brokerage is really going to help you avoid paying too much when you lease a property. It should help you avoid the wrong properties in the wrong areas, and most importantly, get a reduction in the numerous risks that are inherent in the leasing process and signing commercial leases in the market today. As we get started here, let's talk a little bit about tenant pitfalls. There's a few of them here that I wanted to mention. The first one's a lack of understanding about what type of property is in play. And what I mean by that is the type of property, meaning is it a retail space, a general commercial? A lot of this has to do with the use of your particular business versus the type of property that you're looking at. There's a lot of confusion in that area, I find. The second point here is a misunderstanding about what's included in the lease rate. And what I mean by that is the tenant responsible for the roof, for the walls, for the air conditioning system, for the water, those types of things. And while it may sound simple, oftentimes people have a big misunderstanding about what their rate is actually inclusive of. The third point is a lack of understanding about how much it will cost to use the property. It ties back a little bit to that second point in that if you're responsible for some of these items like utilities and repairs of different sorts, the cost of ownership while you're leasing the property could be a lot higher than what you budgeted, and you can avoid that if you know what questions to ask and how to budget for the leasing situation that you're about to enter. The fourth point here is abusive landlord lease terms. We see this a lot. Landlords love to say this is their standard lease and everybody signs it. And in that document is oftentimes included lots and lots of abusive terms, meaning that the terms in the lease are landlord slanted and not tenant slanted. And by the way, all lease terms are negotiable in a commercial leasing situation. And then the last one on this slide is the tenant personally guaranteeing this lease. It's not to say that you're going to avoid a personal guarantee, but what it means is that if your company fails to pay rent, the landlord can come back after you personally, assuming that your company is an entity like a corporation or an LLC. It doesn't mean, again, that you can avoid it, but there are some things that can be done to reduce or mitigate the risks that are inherent with signing a personal guarantee, of course, if you know what you're doing. And then some more common pitfalls here is an unclear understanding regarding how the escalation in the lease is calculated. Many leases contain an escalation. Oftentimes they're calculated based on different factors. Sometimes it's a CPI index. Sometimes it's off of a base figure. And there's oftentimes a big misunderstanding about how those are calculated. And then, you know, when the tenant gets their bill, they're shocked because their cost of ownership during the lease period has gone up way more than they thought. The second one here is the size of the space. Rentable versus usable space is oftentimes incorrect, or the tenant doesn't understand that he's actually paying for more space on a square foot basis, for example, than he's actually using, which is very common in a commercial leasing situation. The third point here is oftentimes tenants start the process way too late and they don't have time for proper due diligence. The biggest item in that due diligence, meaning where the tenant can have his attorney review the lease and make sure that there's nothing wrong that he needs to be aware of in advance before signing it. And then the fourth one is the cost of doing business is not considered. Sometimes it's going to cost a little bit of money to verify some things. It may cost money to do tenant improvements. It may cost money to do changes in the upfit if that is in play, and oftentimes people misunderstand that calculation. And then of course the last one is one that we've all heard, being penny wise and pound foolish, meaning people try to save a few dollars in the name of exposing themselves to a disproportionate amount of risk, and we see that over and over again when tenants are on their own and they're out there trying to lease commercial property. And then the number one tenant pitfall is, of course, the tenant doesn't understand who he's working with and the benefits of using a trusted advisor. A large percentage of tenants will literally drive down the road and call on signs and talk to the nice broker, and many times that broker is not representing their best interest and they're only representing the interest of the landlord, or they may be a principal in the property or the project and they fail to tell the tenant that. And so those are, that's a big one there, by the way. So what kind of broker do you want? Well, the good news is there are tenant brokers out there in the market. People that have tenant rep experience should be people that you focus on. You may want to avoid residential brokers who have never done any commercial leasing. You may want to avoid people that have no experience with leasing commercial properties, in particular representing a tenant on a piece of property. And then finally, before I give you my contact information here, there's one thing to consider. When you use a tenant broker, in a large percentage of the cases, the commission or the fee that's due the tenant broker is actually paid by the listing agent or the landlord. So in many cases, this isn't really going to cost you any more money as if you did it on your own. My contact information is here on this slide. My website's charlottencproperty.com. You can get more information there about this process. And stay tuned for part 2 of this series. And I appreciate your time and consideration here today and look forward to talking with you. Thanks very much. Have a great day.